Stories of an aircraft builder. Stories of an aircraft builder. In 2011, the year of the Big Bang, there were also nice things that I can report on. In episode 36, I told you about the hobby I was supposed to take up on the advice of my flying instructor Paul Erhardt. That turned out to be the 98cc motorcycles. I restored one towards the end of 2008, and now in 2011 an article appeared about this restoration, which I would like to insert briefly for you to take a break from all the flying. In the same year another article was published about these little bikes, and because they were to become part of my later museum, I will also read out the next article in episode 46 for you. For all those who prefer to hear only aviation news, it continues soon. She's a diver. Pulled out of the pond. About the rescue of a beautiful 98cc Express. The Express SL98 once rotted in the mud of the village pond for 15 years and then rusted away in a barn for half a century. In short, it would have been hard to find a worse starting point for a restoration. Why do something like this to yourself? Many enemies? Much honor. Home from a family party, more than a little tired and drunk, the journey ends with a run-up in the village pond. Driver, suddenly sobered up, motorcycle sunk. The latter for a full 15 years. That's how long it took until the farmer's son, born a year after the ditching, investigated the 1935 Express and actually pulled it out of the deep silt. Better preserved than expected. Put it in a barn and forgot about it. More than half a century later, it would become the subject of Achim Engel's first motorcycle restoration. It was all Paul's fault. The flight instructor had given his ex-student Achim, who had previously worked on the detailed replica of Fokker aircraft, the advice. Achim, you have to be careful. People who only ever deal with one subject eventually get a bit cranky in the head. Okay, so let's try something different to clear the brain. But it had to be something old and technical. I stumbled across an Express SL102 by chance, a 98cc motorcycle from 1937 with a 2.25 horsepower Sachs-built engine, ready to ride, but not too nicely restored. I developed a taste for the thing, for sprucing it up and rattling along small roads at a speed of 60. And then I delved a little into the history of the brand and learned that the Express brand, or more precisely the company Goldschmidt and Pirzer Velocipedfabrik from Neumarkt in the Oberpfalz, was the first bicycle producing factory in Germany in 1882 and was also one of the oldest motorcycle manufacturers here. The decision to build such a thing from scratch came naturally, which brings us to our pond find. The wife's first reaction on the €250 pile of rust has been passed down verbatim and is understandable in view of the photos showing the original condition of the 98cc. What a piece of junk! Even after the SL98 had been roughly cleaned with a steamjet, the lady of the house did not want to revise her assessment. But when the old, barely legible registration plate Roman II S0533 came to light, Achim Engel's thirst for research awoke. At the time, I still had no idea what the numbers and digits meant, he says. But in a book on the subject I found out that the Roman II stands for Franconia and the S for the Gunzenhausen district. Gunzenhausen has its own registration office, and they were actually able to tell me the name of the first owner. The name appeared 12 more times in the local phone book, and on attempt number 8, the son of the first owner answered the phone and told me the pond story. When I finally knew the entire biography of the little thing, it was like an obligation for me to restore it. The SL98 was quickly dismantled, but derusting the tubular steel and sheet metal parts took much longer. The rust scars were up to 0.5 millimeter deep. I think the frame has lost quite a bit of weight from all the grinding, laughs Achim Engels. He also dismantled the fork into its components. He actually found remnants of the old paint under the clamps, which were suitable for identification according the RAL charts, and even decorative lines of the pinstriping. Unfortunately, the drive chain had ground a hole in the strut of the frame. No problem for someone who is used to weld entire aircraft fuselages out of tubular steel. Although there was a handlebar, it was no longer the original one. Achim decided against the reproduction handlebar from the shelf and instead opted for the laborious method. Fill ST52 quality mild steel tube with sand, heat it up and bend it. As I was in such a good mood at the time, I made several handlebars for friends, reports the tinkerer. He also made the support tube and clamping fist, and the main stand is also practically a new construction. The mechanic checked the brake drums for concentricity. As expected, he had to turn them over. He riveted on new brake pads, replaced the wheel bearings, and overhauled the torpedo freewheel hub. An early masterpiece of engineering. All in all, a 98cc is a rewarding bike to work on, especially for beginners, says Engels. The technology is largely self-explanatory, but you really have to get to grips with the hub. Just the fact that it has right-hand and left-hand threads here and there, if you don't know that, you're screwing yourself out of your mind. The badly dented fuel tank was also a lot of work. Where the aircraft builder couldn't reach the inside, he applied tin to the outside to restore an even surface. When all the parts were finished, they were given a Furton treatment, sanded again and then painted in Reseda green. At the same time, the parts came back from the chrome plater. It was like Christmas, recalls the Swabian. Correction here, I'm Saxon. Yes, Engels also had to buy some new things. The complete saddle, for example. The original had not survived the damp storage conditions. The headlight was also missing, but the expressman was able to get hold of a part from the supplier Heckel, which was badly patinated but suitable for refurbishment. A complete refurbishment including the reproduction of the lamp ring. Achim Engels really enjoys working with metal, so things are easy to do. He taught himself what he had no experience with. He only left the engine to a specialist. Fridolin Scheidel, the expert from near Regensburg, not only knows the 98 Sachs engine down to the last screw. He overhauled the crankshaft, renewed the cylinders and pistons, replaced the clutch linings, straightened the alternator and ignition system, resealed everything and also took care of the carburetor. Only the totally dented exhaust manifold was Engels' job again. Instead of finding a convenient way to rebuild it, he went to the trouble of making bolts of different diameters and driving them through the dented pipe until it looked like new again. He also ventured into hand-lining the frame, tank and mudguards, sitting at the kitchen table for nights on end and practicing. Lining, wiping. Lining, wiping. Lining, until he was satisfied. In the meantime, his wife had found the last square meters of cowhide from the leather factory in Schorndorf, which had just closed its doors. This was used to make small tool bags by hand, true to the original and detailed, which were mounted on the luggage rack, and were actually only available as original accessoires on the ladies' bike, the SDL 98. The complete restoration of the SL98 took less than 3 months. It was Achim Engels' first ever restoration, but certainly not his last. The man has got the hang of it. There are already more expresses in his workshop waiting to be revived. Written by Norbert Kappes.